Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. This is a channel about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we are very grateful for the opportunity to share our love of Dungeons & Dragons with you. This is our very first episode, so in the spirit of doing new things, we are going to be discussing things we wish we had heard before we started playing Dungeons & Dragons. So a little bit about us before we get into the topic. We are a channel that we love things like horror, spooky, scary. If it has an unsettling aura, this is where it belongs. We enjoy playing evil characters. And a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing in the future about this is going to be how to incorporate those kinds of characters in places where normally they might be a little difficult to fit in. Where like traditional, normal, good, heroic parties would exist, we try to find a way to slip those characters in there to add a little bit of spice to the story, change things up a little bit. And yes, there are repercussions. We will be greatly discussing how to handle those. So just so that way you're aware of who we are and what kind of things we're going to be talking about and getting into, so you can understand what we're looking at in the future. Again, we're very new, so formats might change a little. Things might be a little bit different every time we go through. So we want to thank you for being patient. Please, if you have anything constructive to say, we are listening, and the more help we can get, the better. We love and appreciate the game. We've been playing for a very long time. A lot of our experiences have been through online play, so we're a newer type of gamer as far as this tabletop RPG is concerned. We are very heavy into role-playing. Me specifically, try very hard to do voices and really embody the character and do motions while we speak and conjure spells, whatever it is we're doing. We're very physically active, and we do it incredibly poorly. So if you ever see us doing something silly and ridiculous, feel free to laugh. It's all part of the enjoyment, and we get it. We know we look ridiculous. So now that you got to know a little bit about us, let's talk a little bit about Dungeons & Dragons, and specifically some of the things that we wish we had heard before we started playing. First thing we want to talk about is speaking to your DM. It is normal for you to apply to a game if you're doing it online and have a little bit of a discussion on what kind of character you would like to play and maybe your experience level of playing. But you want to talk in depth about some of the things you want to do or some of the concepts that you want to know about. Especially also playing with anyone that's new. Sometimes you're a new player joining a new game. Sometimes you're a veteran player playing with a new DM. These are a lot of things that I can't help but express is important for you to go over with your DM. A lot of the times DMs play specific ways, and if you don't necessarily know that way to play, you can't anticipate how they'll react to certain things. And there's been quite a few times in the multitude of games that I've played where I had leveled up and I gotten this class ability, and it was finally the time for me to use it. And the DM was unprepared for that, or didn't think that that kind of a scenario would show up at a specific time. And I've had times where like the DM just flat out negated my ability to do so. And, you know, in the heat of the moment, I was upset, not necessarily getting into an argument, but trying to discuss rules or try and figure out whether something's correct or not correct takes you out of the game a little bit. And sometimes if you're someone who's a bystander of the scenario, you kind of just feel a little awkward because you don't really want to join in, but you kind of want to get it done so that way you can get back into the fun of the game. So a lot of those things comes up with a lot of spells, a lot of magical ability or class abilities that might not seem combat effective and more so social interactions kind of spells or abilities and things like that. Those, from my experiences, tend to trip up the DM, and sometimes you're just not prepared for it, or you didn't think about that, or you didn't know the class well enough to anticipate someone actually using that. So when it comes up, I can understand people are thrown off, you know? So discussing some of those things ahead of time would be greatly beneficial, because you can tell them, hey, look, if this ever happens, this is something I want to do. I want to use X, Y, Z for the purpose of doing this. And that will go over a lot well, because now the DM knows something you want to do and can anticipate how to use it, and you can discuss whether or not that's something that would work, or if it has to be scaled back, or if it's not really necessarily going to work on certain types of people because it might disrupt the story. Those kinds of things are better explained out of game, so when they come up, it's not just a whole big confusing moment that kind of takes away from the immersion of the game. Also, and that's just really specific for people, especially people who optimize builds and have very specific things that they need to do. Those things are really important for talking to a DM with. One of the other things about talking to the DM is understanding the kind of game you're about to get into. A lot of DMs now, especially as of late, have been doing a lot of homebrew concepts and games, and they are sometimes they incorporate monsters and new kinds of monsters that are variations of previous ones, where they might change some things. So if you wanted to play a class that was specifically built around maybe using fire damage, and you're about to join a game and you didn't know too much about what the game was, asking, are we going to be fighting things that are like immune to fire, because I wanted to build this character that just does fire damage. And if you showed up that day, you'd have a pretty raw time with a character that basically can't hurt anything that attacks him. And it's okay to ask those kinds of questions, because it doesn't take away from the story. And your DM will give you the opportunity to say, hey, maybe don't use that and use something else, because it's not going to be very effective. Or we're going to be fighting this types of things, or a lot of the story is going to be very dark and very scary and very adult themed, which is great for us, but not everyone likes that. So if there are themes and concepts you don't understand, sometimes medieval times and medieval world might and magic can be very dark and very unforgiving. And if you're not the kind of player that likes to play those games, then that DM might not be the DM for you. And it's okay to come to that conclusion. It's okay to say, you know what, I love your idea, everything sounded great, but if these kinds of things are in the game, it's not going to be enjoyment, or it's not going to bring joy to me. So I think I might just, I don't think this is the right game for me. And that's fine. And that's totally understandable, because you can't have fun if you're uncomfortable. And it's very important to get to those things ahead of time, before game time, before session 0 if you can. So that way you know exactly what to do and where you stand. Because, you got to have fun and you got to be comfortable. And sometimes if you're a new player and maybe, you're like me, who I had to start out not really having a lot of friends that were interested in it, and just kind of going out on my own and finding people that liked it, and finding ways to join them and play and find my own way into the community. Sometimes it just doesn't work out for you that you could just, all your friends are into the same thing. So you do have to be, you will be a little uncomfortable at first, and you don't want to compound that. You want to make it as easy as possible for yourself, and finding the right group of people is a big part of that. And a big portion of doing that is talking to your DM and talking to the players once you start to get an idea of who everyone is, or once session 0 starts, or when you start planning out your characters together, or getting to know one another. Very, very important. And as the game progresses, please continue to talk to your DM as the story begins to unfold and your characters start to interact with these things. Talk to him. Say you got really interested in the hook, and you're just like, look, I want to do this and this and this and this. I want to get into there. I want to do this. I want to do that. If I get the opportunity, I'm going to try and push the story like that. So the DM knows, and maybe that's something he wanted. Maybe that's part of the story, or maybe it's not, but given the opportunity and given the skill level of the DM, they might incorporate that, because that might open up into a cool new adventure, or something that they didn't know might be interested, or maybe the party themselves share that interest. Talking out of game is very, very good. You want to keep a good rapport, you want to make sure you're all on the same page, and it helps to alleviate some of the complexities of in-game sessions where you're faced with a choice between 3 paths, or maybe that's where the game ends for that session, and next week you're going to pick it up, or whenever the next time you're going to play. So as that happens, make sure to talk, because it can reduce the amount of time of going over and over and over the same kind of ideas. So it's a good idea. Please feel free to be vocal, especially out of game, and share things, because the more everyone else knows that you want to do, maybe some people are like, oh, you know what, I was interested in that too, and you can build, certain directions and help make the game feel more reactive to what you're doing. And that's when you really become great at role playing, and because you're now actively part of the world, as opposed to just letting things happen and reacting to them. So that's going to lead us into our second topic, which is role playing. This is something that I happen to enjoy a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, but being someone who has maybe never played before, this might be intimidating. If you happen to be someone that might have social anxiety or difficulty in groups, this is one big, difficult mountain to climb. But a lot of what you see isn't what you need to do. If you've checked out any of the live streams, maybe you've seen Critical Role before, or some of the other people that run games throughout YouTube or Twitch, there is a lot of emphasis on how they do their role playing. A lot of these people are actors, and not all of us are actors. So there is a notable distinction between how they play a game and how most normal people play the game. And you don't have to play any specific way. I happen to like imitating the over dramatic theatrics of it. If you ever have seen me play, I tend to be very physical while I do things. If I'm casting a spell, I'm like channeling magics, and I'm like dancing up and down. I'm jumping off the table, and like whatever is coming that out of my character's own actions, I'm mimicking, or I'm really adamant about it, and animating my face as I speak. Or if I do a specific voice, I played a goblin. I played a character that could speak goblin, and he didn't really know common as well as he knew goblin. So whenever he'd speak, he'd be like, and like I'd like curl up and crawl around and stuff like that, or hop in my chair, because that's kind of what my character would be physically doing as he spoke. And I like doing that stuff, and it is very ridiculous because I don't do it well at all, and I'm fully aware of it. Sometimes people who might be in my house, or maybe my wife will be watching me play, and she'll just look over and laugh because I'm basically throwing myself at the computer screen or whatever it is I'm doing with my friends, and I might be the only one doing it. So it definitely sticks out, but I enjoy it, and I found personally just the more I do it, even in groups that don't reciprocate that kind of level of role playing, the more some people tend to branch towards that, which is just an interesting thing that I've seen, and they start to do a little bit more, and it gets like I always gain more enjoyment when I start seeing people get really, really into it. But you don't have to do any of that at all. There's a lot of ways that you can role play without having to put on a show. One of the more unique ways that I found out that I think is really, really interesting is if you happen to be a very creative person, maybe you're really good with words, but you're not necessarily good with acting. This is what's called third-person role-playing. It's something that I'm new to. I've seen it a few times, but I think it's really, really great. Say you're Rockgar, the barbarian, and you're in a scenario where you just finished a fight. A person using third-player role-playing techniques would say something like, Hrothgar picks up his axe, looks around, and says, with the amount of noise we've just made, we got to get moving, otherwise more are going to come. And you might have described his voice previously as having like a very deep, raspy voice, or a very guttural sound emitting, or maybe like a southern drawl or something that uniquely defines it, and you might never have to actually do that. But you did actively roleplay. You did give some information, and you did portray a scenario in the game that works. Everything was understood, everything was well thought out, and the more creative you are with words, the more elaborate you can get with things like that, and describing his actions and how he looks, and that's a great way to do it. And you don't have to put on a voice for that. You just have to describe your character once, and then just go with that kind of mentality, and it works, and it's great. And it's not an emphasis on creating a new voice for anything, or coming up with an accent, or like trying to growl or whisper when you speak. A lot of those things are coming up now because people just trying it and trying to imitate what they see maybe on TV or on Twitch, or characters that they build based on fictional characters that they've seen in other media venues. Though I do that, not everyone else has to. You can always just role play just by using your own voice and just being active in the game. And this is the aspect of role playing that I think is the most important, is being active in the story. When the DM gives you a hook or introduces a character, wanting to know what they can about that character, wanting to know around the world what the DM built, like what it's like, trying to just ask good questions, move the story forward, wanting to be an adventurer or a hero is a fundamental necessity in a great character that I find. A lot of people build characters, and they're these incredible characters with this wonderful backstory, just layers and layers of personality and desires, and none of those desires are heroes. Why would you fight for anything? You know, like, you got to have a reason to be in the story, you know, and being an adventurer, wanting to go forward and experience these wonderful things, or trying to save the world because it's just an opportunity to save the world. Those things are important. Those things are what make a character important to the story. And when you're important to the story, you can impact the story. And that's where role-playing really lives. It's on how your characters impact the story and each other. You can role play just in party members. You cannot be the character that talks to the NPCs and just talks to the party, and that's fine. That's great. You know, as long as you're taking an active part of the story and saying, look, I trust this character, or I don't trust this character, or these NPCs are not cool, or I like these, but these guys seem like they're lying to us, or maybe my religion dictates that. Try it. You don't have to go over the top with theatrics and acting or anything like that. Just being active, knowing your character. Or if you have difficulty making your character, talk to the DM, you know, and bounce some ideas off of them. Because maybe they have a specific character that in their mind would be the hero. And no one else has any of those concepts or relationships with the world. So maybe they can help you build that character to help draw the hooks in easier and follow the little breadcrumbs of story tips that, you know, lead you to the main plot, which is really, really important. You know, you got to push the story forward. You got to want to be part of the story. You have to want to be the adventurer. Doing so is all about being active. Pay attention. And this comes specifically for people who play online. Everyone knows when you're not paying attention. You know, like, it comes to your turn and all of a sudden everyone's lost or confused, or, you know, we know. It happens to me. And it's important to try and put your best effort in staying with the story. All right. So in conclusion, talk to your DMs. Talk to them beforehand. Lay everything out that you want to do and things that you're interested in, things that you are not. DMs are out there to tell this incredible story, and they are on our side. They want to see us succeed. People have to remember that one thing. I know a lot of times they think it's a little different, but it's really not that case. DM story really doesn't go anywhere if we don't win, you know? So just remember, please, talk to your DMs. Share. Sometimes telling them these things is going to revitalize them and get them super pumped, and it helps to keep the momentum going of the game. Secondly, just try. You cannot fail at role-playing as long as you're trying. Be active. Take an interest in the story. It's all you need to succeed. If you have social anxiety, if a lot of these things are difficult, I'm sorry to say that I can't just say it's going to be easy and have it all just be washed away. But a lot of the times the people you're going to be playing with are incredible. They want you to be part of this. They want you to share in the joy that is this game, and being a part of it is a wonderful thing to be in. Everyone has a place in this community, even us, and we're the spooky kids. So if we could find a home here, rest assured you can too. Thank you for giving the Spooky Kid a chance. I hope to see you again soon.